Hey, thank you for checking out the Performance Anxiety Podcast on the Pantheon Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mark. And on this edition of Side Projects, I'm joined by Alexander Hacke and Danielle DePicciotto of hackedepicciotto, and Ellen Southern and Tom Bush from Dead Space Chamber Music to talk about Musique, Concrète. We discuss what it is and how each of them discovered the genre. We also talk about how it's influenced the music that they make. They've each used some strange instruments to create their own Musique Concrète, including a jet turbine and a serrated knife on a stone. It really is amazing how repurposing objects to make Musique Concrète can actually give them a whole new life. And sometimes Musique Concrète is created by accident, like, for example, when a flute has the wrong mouthpiece, and other times when repairing an instrument can actually ruin the qualities that you want. Recording the music can be part of the process of creating the desired sound, but you have to be ready because sometimes you only get one take. We talk about all of this and a lot more. Follow hackedepicciotto on the socials at hackedepicciotto. Follow Dead Space Chamber Music at Dead Space Chamber Music. And pick up the Silver Threshold and the Black Hours on Bandcamp. Follow us at Performance ANX. And you can support the show at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety, or you can buy merch at performanceanx.threadless.com. Now let's get into some found sounds and Musique Concrète with hackedepicciotto and Dead Space Chamber Music on Performance Anxiety, part of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
We made it.
Hey, all right, there you are. I can see you guys now.
Good morning.
All right. Hello. All right. Danielle and Alexander, meet Tom and Ellen from Dead Space Chamber Music. Tom and Ellen,
meet you. How do you do?
Oh, so good to meet you.
So,
to meet you.
This, to be honest, this was kind of Ellen's idea. I've got to give credit where credit's due. So, I love having Danielle and Alex on, and Tom and Ellen, I wanted to have you guys back on because I enjoyed our conversation so much the last time. And I was trying to think of ways to get them on again, and we were talking about Musique Concrète, but through email, so I didn't even know how to pronounce it at the time. And so Ellen suggested it. I'm like, I bet they had mentioned that they were fans of Neubauten. So I'm like, I just got an email the other day from Howard Wolfing saying that he would love it if we could get you guys back on the podcast. I'm like, the stars have aligned. This is perfect. So I reached out and everybody was open, and I think this is fitting. This is great. So what I wanted to do is find out about Musique Concrète because it's fascinating to me. I've known that it exists. I never really realized it was a genre per se with a title and a name and, people who kind of started the entire thing, which kind of sounds stupid now that I say it out loud. But I never realized how in-depth it was and how expansive it was. Alex and Danielle, let's start with you guys. How did you guys discover this type of music and what drew you into it as opposed to just regular blues or rock and roll or what drew you to it in the first place, I guess? I'll shut up now.
Well, in the early 80s, when I started experimenting with sound, or actually even when I was a little kid, when I got my first acoustic guitar and a cassette recorder and a microphone, I would drown the microphone in the body of the guitar and record stuff, and I was obsessed with horror movies and science fiction and I was more about sounds and the effects that sounds would have than music initially, and music came later. and so a lot of the things that I discovered or that we discovered with Neubauten in the early days, I had to learn that a lot of that stuff already existed. I was convinced that I invented Dada. And then we would learn about people like Pierre Henry or the originators of Musique Concrète. And also other composers like Luigi Nono, who worked with the found sounds, if you will, and it's just it gives you the realization that everything that is audible is also music.
Yeah.
And an early concept of ours was to expand the term of music to the extent that everything has become music, realizing that at the same time you destroy music or you kill music, because if everything has become music, then there is no more music.
That's a great point. That's like in The Incredibles, if everyone's a superhero, then nobody's a superhero.
Exactly.
All right, Tom and Ellen, what about you guys? How did you guys discover it? Who were you into early on?
Well, yeah, I mean, that is interesting because it reminds me of something that you just said there, which is you might be doing certain things yourself. And when you start, you don't necessarily realize that there were all these people who came before you who were doing similar things. So without really being conscious of it, you're within a tradition, something that has a long history, but you didn't really know. So then that kind of comes subsequently. So I suppose I was doing things that might be in this area before. I'd listened to a band like Einstein and Neubauten, and or the other one would be Test Department from the UK. So I can relate to that. I suppose is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think especially for artists who you're doing things and you're not sure of your lineage and your inheritance in a way, what you do is quite experimental. People ask you, what kind of music do you make? And you don't really know what to say. You're just doing it. And then you learn that there's all these people and you feel sort of part of something. I mean, when hearing you talk just then, I got flashes back of when I was a child and I used a cassette recorder as a plaything, because that's, it's like, that's my age. They were freely available in the 80s. And so I grew up on a small holding. So I would be carrying this thing around, putting it under straw, pulling it along the ground, listening back, hearing, and stuff like that. And didn't even think of it as making art per se, but it was just so tactile and physical. And I think it inspired me because I was a visual artist for many years before I started to sing. And I think it inspired me to kind of consider the physicality of sound, but also the traces of a process that are then embedded, of an action or a ritual that are actually embedded, and the magic of how you transform the world through what you hear.
Yeah.
You know the origin of that sound and you have a memory of it, but then it becomes something else and tells you something back to you almost. So working with these kind of sounds now with Dead Space Chamber music, for me, it's very much part of the trying to have a sort of 3D immersive idea of the physicality of the sound, but also the story of the sound, where that came from, how it was made, and the meaning of that relating to the track that we're using those sounds on, whether they're looped or sampled, or whether they're physically made during live performances.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships or at work, not dealing well with the stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better, because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Try doing that in person. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And a special offer to Performance Anxiety listeners, you can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/performanceanxiety. That's betterhelp.com/performanceanxiety. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
I also think it's really important to have that naivete or that, that non-knowing, because I have actually met artists that knew all about music history or art history, and they were constantly blocked because they would want to do something and they'd be like, oh my God, no, that's already been done, and that's already been done. And they don't do anything. They basically can't do anything at all because basically almost everything has in a way been done. But of course, the individual way of doing it is different. And so you go through that and it emerges into something completely personal. So I think it's actually a really important way of discovering what your own voice is before you're blocked by the knowledge of thousands of people who've done this before me.
The state of innocence.
Yeah.
One of the things that was really interesting to me was to find out how early on it influenced pop music. The Beatles' Tomorrow Never Knows is considered one of the first pop song with samples. I've recently just found out Pink Floyd recorded an entire album of household objects. Only 2 songs exist now: The Hard Way and Wine Glasses. I think The Hard Way used rubber bands for a bass. It's crazy.
I'm not sure now. I mean, don't know if I'm remembering this right, but the wine glasses thing, I think that ended up on Shine On You Crazy Diamonds.
Yeah.
Like big expansive sound, and you sounds like a synthesizer.
I found a clip on YouTube of, it may be 10 years ago now, but in the pantheon of Pink Floyd, that's very recently, I guess, of Gilmour playing live or getting ready to play a live show. And he for that song, he had the wine glasses set up and he had people playing the wine glasses. That was just wild. What are some of the weird instruments that you guys have had to use in recording, or well, not had to, but chosen, I guess, to use in creating music? I know, Alex, last time you were on, you were telling me about like engine parts, I think, some kind of like jet engine parts, I believe.
Yeah. With Woody from Neubauten, he has actually a jet engine, a jet turbine, or the inside of a jet turbine that he says he found in the fields of Bavaria. I mean, he really stole it from an army base somewhere, but yeah. You know, I think the greatest thing about this concept of using objects is the repurposing of objects, giving these things a new life. You know, like just being a rake for the sake of being a rake is a very boring existence. You know, you can turn a rake into a musical instrument, and that kind of, you know, adds a certain element of glamour and purpose to that before very basic and meager existence. You know, and I think that's a great thing. And also, you can turn these objects into jet setters. You know, I mean, imagining how often they have traveled around the world in the meantime. When before they were just a bucket, and now they are, you know, like a bucket for an intercontinental flight.
They become almost like your mascots.
Yeah,
these particular objects that make these particular sounds. And it's kind of, it's very warm, and it makes you more relate to them, because you think, well, I'm just an ordinary person. And yet whenever we get to do a performance or something like that, you also feel really honored and privileged, and like you get to be transform yourself, like this everyday object. So you're like an everyday object, but you get to kind of go through this transformation for a little while,
It's also
so it's a humble thing.
one of the things that I always that blew my mind as I was talking to Alexander the last time you guys were on was how it allows people who maybe can't afford to buy a proper instrument to create music.
I mean, for instance, for me, it's always been the case that I've been bored by regular sounds. I grew up learning classical instruments, and I really loved it, but it somehow didn't touch me. And then it was the same thing with like regular pop music or mainstream music that I heard. It didn't touch me. And then when I started listening more to underground experimental music, every time it was something unusual, like an unusual, hopefully rough sound, it hit me like a I don't know what. And then I started hearing music of people that would, not instruments, but actually with like, metal or wood or whatever. And I just realized it just touched me so much that it was like, okay, that's my area. And we have a friend in New York, for instance, I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Larry Seven. And he goes through all the flea markets and garbage piles and things from the street and takes it home. His whole apartment is full of stuff. And he just loves taking them apart, and then putting them together in different ways and then making sounds with them. And it just makes me feel like I'm having some kind of, I don't know, ecstatic state of something.
He has a 1970s 8-track tape recorder that he actually found on the street in the Lower East Side.
And he works
on technology that used to be, a couple of $100,000 now, just ends up on the street and he picks it up and he fixes it and his entire studio.
Wow.
Yeah. So basically that's what we try to achieve with the stuff that we work with. I mean, we work with instruments, of course, that are like the guitar and the bass or the violin, but we try to create sounds with them that are different and also use instruments that create old-fashioned sounds, because like old sounds from the hurdy-gurdy, because it has a completely different feel of time to it. And time is an essence of that too, that you suddenly get brought into a different state of time if you're listening to different kinds of sounds. And that's something we always try to somehow achieve for ourselves because it makes us happy.
Well, I think that's an area where you and Ellen and Tom can really connect.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like I love the combination of what you might call, traditional sounds, the kind of sounds that you expect from conventional instruments and more unusual side of things. And I think I understand what you were saying before about certain sounds in classical music or pop music, where I suppose, like my take on that might be that there are no surprises anymore. Like you know what it is, what
you
kind
can go
of
ahead
sound.
and say boring. It's okay.
Well, I mean, the thing that popped into my head was I was going to say, like, I suppose like a conventional kind of classical string quartet. I've got nothing against a conventional classical string quartet, but if I listen to something like that, then I know what sounds I'm going to hear, really. Mm-hmm. If it's something from like the 18th century or 19th century, I mean, obviously, because it's so long ago, so that's not their fault. They were alive, but I mean, I know what kind of sound it is that I'm going to hear. But then, when you get into the kind of stuff that we're talking about here, like you're going to be surprised. So you might listen to stuff where you hear sound and it's not something, it's a texture maybe that you've never heard before. And I guess it's kind of like a switch goes on in the brain. Something probably happens in the brain. You're surprised, and then immediately kind of like a light bulb goes off, and then you're switched on. You're engaged. But
we'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
If it's music using sounds that you expect and following conventions that you expect, it can be a bit like, I know that sounds, I don't mean to sound dismissive about, people who've done great stuff with conventional means, but there aren't any surprises, I guess. Yeah,
and one of the cool things about Musique Concrète is how expansive it is, because it's not just playing an engine part percussively. It's taped sounds and samples, and there's such a breadth of things that are considered, sounds that are considered musique concrète, that it seems like a genre that's just almost never ending. It's almost overwhelming to me in that sense.
Let me put it this way. If starting from the observation that the material world really is an illusion. I mean, not an illusion, but it's a lack of our abilities to observe the fact that everything really is vibrations. All right. And so everything that we do is about creating resonance with people, with our audience, or with ourselves. We resonate with certain vibrations, and therefore we love them or we hate them. And these vibrations, they can come from any object or from anything, from any sound. It is about the resonance. It is about actually feeling something or relating to what you hear. And what I find very interesting, and I think about this a lot, and I ask whenever I get the chance, talking to someone who has perfect pitch, for example, somebody who knows exactly what is in tune and what is not, and I always wonder how these people are affected by things that are slightly out, like certain engine sounds or something, they do have that problem where they go like, wow, this is not quite there. This is flat, the bus that I'm riding on is flat.
But you can like that.
Absolutely, you can like that.
I like it.
Exactly. And
I like a flat bus.
And and then to get to this resonance, any means of manipulation, I think, is valid. You can do anything you ever want. Like the Burroughs cut up technique and the taping and playing back technique.
John Cage.
We know this great artist, Jakob Kierkegaard. He's a Danish guy, and he did a thing that he went to Chernobyl, and he just put a recorder into an empty room in Chernobyl somewhere, one of those vacant buildings, and recorded that building, and then played the recording of that building back into the building, and recorded that, and played that back into the building, and recorded that, like a couple hundred times actually, until he created this resonance just of the building with itself that is like a solid, massive drone. That just comes out of nowhere, or of just the existence.
That's fascinating.
For me, that's the ultimate musique concrète for me. Where there's not even anything.
Especially since
the dead air, they make that resonance.
Especially since most things in Russia are made of concrete.
Yeah.
So, how do you guys incorporate musique concrète in your latest work? I know Danielle and Alex, you guys have birds chirping in Overture, and there's stuff throughout the album. Going through it, and I'm pulling up my list here because I wanted to mention a couple of things. Like Meteor's Rain is one of my favorites. But Alex, we spoke about this the last time you were on. The throat singing that you did in Babel is just cool. I really love hearing you do that. That it was just awesome.
Thank you.
But when you go into the studio, do you have these sounds ready? Do you have it in your head what you want, like the birds chirping, or Tom and Ellen, in your case, like maybe the broken bits of porcelain that you've used in the past? Or is that something that presents itself as you're recording? Oh, hey, I think this would sound good here. Or is it a mixture of both?
I think with us, it's a mixture of both. Usually we have a certain kind of content theme of the idea that we want to do. Like, for instance, with Perseverantia, it was about our nomadic journeys and how we were trying to like not despair and not give up and about perseverance.
Yeah.
That was like our main theme, and being nomads. With the last album, we were kind of, thrown out of context because we had planned to be touring the whole year and everything was canceled. And so we were basically stuck in Berlin. And we were very, very open. Like, we didn't have a specific thought. We just kind of had the thought of the situation that we're in and the situation that the world is in. And for me specifically, I was thinking a lot about nature versus mankind, and how they're like opposing each other, or how they're actually, of course, part of one another. And that's the theme of our whole album. So we had that theme as an idea, vaguely, but otherwise this album specifically was created very with intuition, like intuitionally.
Okay, and that's the Silver Threshold as for the new album.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Got to make sure I mention that.
Also for us, it was a different situation than usual because usually we're on the road and we record with very minimal recording stuff. Mm-hmm. And, we do our engineering ourselves. And this time we actually did it in the studio for the first time in years and had an engineer, which gave us the possibility of just concentrating on the music and really being able to interact even more freely than usual. And that was really great. So I think that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah. So you could say the most concrete thing that we have on the last album is live rooms, as opposed to digital reverb spaces or weird. Well, we do have live rooms on the other recordings as well, but they are not proper live rooms. Here we had we had like a proper large live room where we could throw things around and place amplifiers and make the entire building ring with what we're doing. So that's the most concrete thing that we can. This time around.
Well, Tom and Ellen, what about you guys? You just released an album in December, The Black Hours. Was there a lot of Musique Concrète done for that album?
Well, one thing that occurs is for us, looking back at all the achievements you guys have had in your careers, like one thing I think for us that's a challenge is studio time it's quite limited because of the cost, very mundane thing. So we're always, for me, it would be fantastic to be able to actually have more playtime in that sort of context and to have that idea of the recording studio or the recording space, wherever it is, as an instrument in itself. What we've tended to do is take, our sounds in the form of samples or loops, but also physical objects that we use during performance. We take those in with us. So, and for me, that's like taking part of the performative residue in with you. Like, for example, we did do an EP in a church, a beautiful church in Gloucestershire. And so I took in a knife and a stone that I used to create a rhythm. Yeah. On one of the tracks. And it's quite a funny object because it's a very Black Desert is the name of the song, and it's a very tense. discovering what it's about, really. But there's a lot of glossolalia in it. But the knife on the stone is actually a serrated knife because that sounded best because of all the little indentations. So I felt like it sounds like it's a knife sharpening, but actually it's blunting it. So it's
okay.
And that, again, is ambiguous. But so we've done that live. And that was always funny when the knife was glinting in the lights.
Yeah, it's because you were always like, oh, should I check?
Knife hounds.
What's the venue?
Do I check
about,
do I check in the knife?
Yeah. It's a good point.
I mean, there's actually loads of funny stories about the objects when you take them around the world, as you were alluding to it. And it actually adds to your own sense of mythology about your own fact. It's another thing. But doing that action in that, the resonance of that church that church was incredible because there was loads of beautiful wooden panels. So it wasn't a cold reverb, it was a warm reverb. It suited us amazingly well. And so to have that being done, recorded on tape, we recorded on tape in there because actually Pro Tools crashed. That the church electrics wouldn't support it. So if we hadn't had real tape, we literally wouldn't have that EP.
The digital stuff.
It wasn't just a novelty to have the tape. Literally, that's how we got it. But and we only had obviously one take of each. But yeah, just doing that action, that's the stone, the same stone and the same knife that that we performed it with, and taking it into the recording space like that. But yeah, for me, like to have more actual discovery playtime. We tend to kind of have to approach it as in we basically need to get this done in 2 days and we get one take or two of each. And, it would be great to have more playtime, really.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in terms of recording in a studio, we've done it maybe 3 or 4 times, I think. And it's been difficult. It would be great to go in and just get stuck into the possibilities and be able to enjoy it. But, I guess we've certainly felt like a level of pressure in the studio environment. Yeah.
Do you guys, all of you together, do you find it difficult sometimes to recreate some of these sounds in a live environment, or do you not even care and it's just you're going to do something else for some of these songs with these elements in the live setting? Alex and Danielle, why don't we start off with you guys on that one?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've been playing lately is this little Turkish flute, and I was playing it.
It's not a flute.
And I was playing it incorrectly because without realizing, and it's very piercing. It's very small. It's about this big, and it has this piercing sound, which I thought was absolutely wonderful. This really weird sound. It sounds like a dying shot duck or something. And Alex and I was very proud of the fact that it's the first instrument I've ever managed to get Alex to say it's too loud. I mean, to have a Neubauten member say that is a true achievement. And so I really enjoyed playing it live too, because it was louder than anything else. It's just incredible.
Jeez.
And we are quite loud when we perform. So now we did this radio play not long ago where a friend of ours specializes in unusual flute things, or whatever you're going to call them. And he said, oh, no, you've got the wrong mouthpiece. And so he gave me the right mouthpiece.
Oh.
And it's completely different. It's muffled. It sounds, it's got a nice sound, but it's much deeper and it's definitely not as piercing.
Oh.
So now I'm using that. Alex is very happy and I'm a little disappointed because I really enjoy playing it live. So I have to decide which version I'm going to use next.
I
mean, again, there is no right or wrong. The same thing happened with your hurdy-gurdy, the hurdy-gurdy that Danielle played. Once we managed to locate the guy who actually built her hurdy-gurdy.
The birthplace,
in Vienna. And it happened to be broken on that leg of the tour. And we went to see him. And he said, oh, yeah, well, and I remember this. And I sold this many years ago and stuff. And he fixes for it. And
he said, the sound is terrible. And I always loved it. Super rough. And it was like, it kind of like also sounded like some kind of monumental dying animal. Like that. And so he was like, this is terrible. It's so rough.
So he put the proper strings on it and stuff. And Danielle didn't get to check it out. And the next show she played, like, she just started playing and she almost started crying.
Yeah, because it was kind of like a medieval instrument, all beautiful and la la la. And I was like, no, I can't go back to what it sounded like.
It was like it sounded like it had been castrated or something like that. The next thing we did was like we put the wrong strings on again, like metal strings instead of the gut strings that were supposed to be on there. Oh, and now it's back at its old majestic beauty.
It's very important to be able to like use those sounds live.
But what I was meaning to say is that it is all about infusing any action or any object with whatever you do. It can be anything you do, and I think we are all along the same lines here, that it doesn't really matter whether it is a musical instrument or whether it is not a musical instrument. It doesn't matter whether it's recorded in a studio or it's a field recording.
Yeah.
What we do is we infuse meaning. We make every action that we do, we make it a symbolic action that conveys a deeper truth in one way or another. And that's what it's all about. It doesn't matter how you get there. And the great thing is you can also project this kind of truth in any other thing. You can have and that's the great thing about music. You can have like a dear connection with something that is just mainstream, but for you it means something entirely different. And that's great.
So Tom and Ellen, you've had an album just come out in December. How can people find it? It's called The Black Hours, and Dead Space Chamber Musique. Awesome album. I'm still listening to it. I still love it. So how can people follow you guys and find the album?
We're on all the usual social media platforms, but mainly through Bandcamp. If you go to Bandcamp, we're on there.
Excellent. And it's not hard to find Dead Space Chamber Musique. I think you guys are probably the only one.
Yeah.
The name of the Dead Space Chamber.
Yes.
Yeah. It's either the band or one of those immersion chambers where you sensory deprivation things. So either way, it's pretty cool. So Alex and Danielle, how can people find the new album, The Silver Threshold, follow you guys and see what you guys are up to?
Basically the same thing on the regular media. We've got a Bandcamp site. And as we just were signed by Mute, I guess it's in the stores too, but as we're in a lockdown, we don't really know.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, guys, this has been a blast. Ellen, thank you for sending me down the rabbit hole that I'm going to continue to go down because there's just so many offshoots. It's just blowing my mind. And I really do seriously thank you for kind of introducing me into the actual genre because it's something that I kind of knew existed, but I didn't know it had a formal title, formal genre. I don't know. It's still early. I don't have all my words yet. So Alex and Daniel, thank you guys for coming on and talking about your experiences. And I'm really, really enjoying the new album, The Silver Threshold. It's just, like I had mentioned before, I'm looking at my favorites. I mentioned Meteor's Rain and Babel, Trebas, Journey East. The whole middle of the album just to me, just kind of flows so perfectly. I absolutely love it. Are you guys settled down for a lockdown now, or are you guys still kind of living the nomadic life?
Well, we have been stuck in Berlin in our studios. You see Danielle's studio here, and our studio is the other studio is next door, and that's where we spend our time. And we don't get out much.
We're hoping to tour in 3 weeks. We're going to be touring through Europe, where we hope it's going to work out because it's already been canceled 3 times. And we hope to come to the UK in the summer. So where are you based?
Bristol.
Oh, we would love to play there. So we'll meet you in person there. That'd be great.
Yeah, it'd be great to see you here.
Yeah. Really great. Wonderful to meet up.
Well, I will make sure you guys connect through at least email. If not, you guys can always connect on social media. And unfortunately, I can't really meet up with all of you guys at the same time. So unless somebody's willing to fly me to the UK, or I can get all you guys over here to DC.
Exactly.
That would be. Hey, we can get a Dead Space Chamber Hackedepicciotto tour going.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I want to thank you one last time. I definitely don't want to get cut off on this. I want to end formally. The last 2 times I've done this with multiple people, in the middle of a sentence, I think I've gotten cut off. So that's a weird thing to have to edit out. Talk about podcast concrete. That's just, that's hard to do. Thank you guys so much. It's been wonderful. And we definitely have everybody back on again and do a whole nother episode of something else that's just as fun to talk about.
Yes.
Right.
All right.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah.
And,
Very
Wonderful to meet you.
all right.